Right, so, and we are recording again. So, now that we've kind of dipped our toes in Substance Painter a little bit, just kind of the basic workflow for a generic asset, for something with multiple materials being used, let's go in a little bit deeper and have an asset that requires a few more channels. Possibly for opacity and emissive, which are not part of your default set list. So you can save your work right now, file save as in your own locker, your substance project if you haven't done so already. So I'm gonna save this out again. Yeah, just go ahead and file save as. There we go. All right. By the way, actually, for the screen students, let me just show you how you actually export this out, because my game artists know this. So if you can just look up here, whenever you are ready to export textures out, you would go to File, Export Textures. It brings up this window here. Now, with this, you can set the path to where you will save files to. So in this case, it's defaulting my C drive. I would want to change that. You would want to set your image type here. Right now, it defaults to a PNG. For you guys, most likely it will be a TIFF or Targa. It really depends on what your usage is. You're going to want something with multiple channels in it, or an alpha transparency most likely. So TIFF or Targa is what I usually default to. So Targa definitely for the game artists. Looking at our texture sets. So I didn't really talk about texture sets. We'll get to in a second. So this is if you have multiple materials on different aspects of your model, of your low poly model. So in this case, it only had one Lambert shader on the entire weapon, so therefore it only has one set of textures that I'm going to export. So one set of color, metallic, normal, roughness, all of that stuff. But we can change our configuration here for different export options. So if you scroll all the way up, you see things for Sketchfab, document channels, Amazon Lumberyard, Arnold, which is another rendering engine within Maya, which is now the default one in 2017 on up. CryEngine 3, Corona, Keyshot, I created some. PBR Metal Rough is probably the one that you guys will most likely use, or you'll have to create your own custom one. For the game artists, I've shown you Unreal Engine 4, V-Ray, all this stuff, but to see what those actually look like, you can go to your configuration tab up here. And this is where you will actually set your different configurations or your export options. So if I select the PBR Metal Rough, that's the generic one that I need for the most part. So I have at my output maps, and you can see with the name next to them, it uses like this naming convention with the $ mesh. It's using the name, it calls the name of the mesh underscore $ texture set, so the texture set name underscore, and then the name of the layer, or the name of the texture. So base color, roughness, metallic, normal, height, and emissive. So it gives me all of these channels exported out as separate Targa files, the way that I have it set currently. You can actually create your own from scratch. So if I were to right click and I can duplicate one to start off with, because one thing I've noticed here, I don't have one for my ambient occlusion. So I'd want to make one for my actual ambient occlusion texture to plug it in or however I need it. So what I can do is I can right click and I can duplicate this one, and it creates a new one at the very bottom. Right now it's called PBR Metal Rough Copy, and let's say I was to rename this for Maya test. Or RenderMan. I'll say RenderMan 21. So if I were to create a new output map, I could create one with only grayscale information, which is gray up here. I could make one with RGB, R plus G plus B, as separate channels that I can import to. RGB plus A. So let me just create a new RGB and show you what that looks like. Show you what this looks like. So I can actually drag one of these input maps to RGB altogether, or I can import, like, you know, black and white maps onto each channel individually. So I can put like my roughness, my metalness, and ambient occlusion on a single texture. But they're hidden within each channel. Yes.
That's a very strange question. Is there any way we can like either swap the lights that are on and off or something? Because I'm massively off.
Okay. I can turn off the lights. Would that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll see how this looks in the recording, right? So I could bring in each of those maps individually. As long as I know it is a black and white map, it has no color information, then I would drag it in each of those things. I'm not going to do that for now. You guys will need to do it later, most likely, or we can export out each individual map separately and just have way more textures. That's fine. But I'm just going to delete this. So again, I'm trying to get my ambient occlusion, so I'm going to try to find it in my input maps. So ambient occlusion is right here. So I can click and drag it over RGB, and from ambient occlusion, go to my gray channel. And now it's actually connected. So to follow the proper naming convention, I'm just going to copy over another attributes, paste it, and then just call this like AO or ambient occlusion. And now I can choose this, my export options. I can choose that configuration, and I called it RenderMan 21. So now it'll remember, hey, export these maps with this naming convention, and then set to targas, set to my proper folder. And I usually make a substance folder with Painter, and then I put textures. And then depending on which textures that I'm using, so it's not, I try to stay organized depending on what platform I'm exporting to. So between Marmoset Toolbag, RenderMan, Unity, and an Unreal, I might try something like that. Select my folder, and then export. And it finished. I open my folder, and they should all be there. So there we go. There's all my textures as Targa files. I may want to rename them so it's not underscore Lambert1 underscore AO, but I'll get to that later. Cool. So that's done. And I'm just going to go ahead and make a new file now. So now I'm going to be working, and we are all going to be working on texturing the sci-fi pillar this time with some additional channels. So again, creating a new project. We will select PBR metallic roughness. And we're going to select the correct mesh. In this case, it is the sci-fi pillar mesh, not the high poly one. We're looking for the other one, the smaller file. Cool. And for my sake, I'm just going to save it as 2K. But remember, this is a non-destructive workflow, meaning that I can, again, go between multiple sizes and resolutions. I can always go back. This is why I love this program so much. It works the way that I do in Photoshop, meaning I always like to have a layer to go back to, having a mask to go back to, and I don't actually lose any work, or I don't accidentally merge down stuff, because it all has to exist in layers. So you need to understand layers and layer masks in order to use this effectively. I don't have any additional maps to bake on, so by default you should be an OpenGL. I usually switch to DirectX for the normal map format. I don't know if that's different for you guys by default. I just switch over to DirectX. It's not a huge deal. But once you're done, hit OK. Now you will notice something slightly different. It's not different, actually. Never mind. Never mind. I thought I imported the one with multiple texture sets. Yeah, well, actually, I may tell you guys to... Hold on. 1 second. Let me grab this file. All right, let me go to the proper file here. I want it to look different, actually, for demonstration purposes. So let me open my scene. Okay. Save. Yelling at me because I have mental ray nodes. Okay. Again, this is my high poly with my color ID information baked down to it. Hide that one. Okay. Come on. Okay, good. Alright, let's try this now. File, export selection. And I'm going to put the file in the folder, that way you guys can reload the scene with it. So let me go to my teacher projects, scenes. Okay. So I'm going to grab this, scenes. Okay, there we go. So copy that guy into the classes folder. Game art year 2, exercises, game environments, today, scenes. So I'm copying over Sci-Fi Pillar Mesh Multi-Mat Low Poly, so you know exactly what it is. And then also to the screen, year 2, exercises, today's date, same place. So you'll have to create a new scene with it. So file, new, and discard the changes from this one. Load that new model in there. Once you're done, hit OK. There it is. Now it's correct. So once you load it in, you notice that my actual texture set list has changed now. Yours might be somewhere else. Let's see where it is on yours. Yes, yours is all the way in the upper right-hand corner of your screen by default. So you'll notice that it says Lambert2 underscore Lambert as well as Lambert1. That's just what I named the shader. Yes. Somebody delete that file? It should be there. Yes. That's weird. Oh, did somebody move it? Try reloading that window, Kyla. That might fix it. I think somebody had accidentally moved it and then moved it back. Or cut it, paste it. No? Why am I seeing a different one than you guys are? That's weird. Screen year 2, exercises. I'm just gonna copy it over to EXRs and see if it. Okay. All right. So, now that you've reloaded your scene with the new model, what we notice now is in our texture set list that we have 2 materials that we're calling on. One is their default Lambert1, which should be our base body, which you can actually toggle visibility if you click on or off these texture sets. So right now we have our base body with Lambert1, and we have that glass section with Lambert2. Kind of see what's happening. And then with both of them on, they're both visible all at once. So what it means now is that I can control, I will have 2 sets of textures that I can then export out from here. So this is useful if you had multiple objects as part of your export that you brought into here. So with their own like UV sets or their own UV shells. In this case, everything still is on one UV layout, so technically it's not the ideal solution, but I like to use color ID maps for that reason, and we're going to be using a combination of both for this, both texture sets and color IDs. So first of all, we need to bake our textures, right? So let's go ahead and bake our textures. Output size, change it to 2048. Select our high definition mesh. In this case, it is the sci-fi pillar high poly color.obj. Yep. So you'll again need to change the ID map to use material color instead of vertex color. So right now, vertex color is turned on, turn off material color. And you can actually apply this to all. Right now it's setting to a certain texture set. Right now I can switch between Lambert 1 and Lambert 2. You can actually apply to all if you wanted to.
You want to do that?
Let's see what happens, sure.
Alright.
It needs to be material color. Sorry, material color. Yeah, let's actually only do it on Lambert 1 for right now.
Okay.
And we'll go back to the Common tab and make sure that we're set to 2K at the top. We loaded in our high definition mesh here using this import button, this little icon for importing a model. Little page with a little dog ear. Now if you needed to fix stuff like your max frontal distance and rear distance, remember how we did the cage in X normal? It's the same principle, but it's using a slider instead of a 3D view for it. So that's where you would change your overall kind of envelope for your baking of your textures. And you can, there's a lot of other options. I'm not too worried about it right now. I'm just worried about our, bare bones, how to bake stuff. Turning off thickness. We're going to leave everything else on. And I'm just worried about our one set of textures for Lambert 1 for ID as material color. And then once I'm done, I can just bake Lambert 2 and see what happens. Or Lambert 1, sorry. I apologize. I'm actually on the wrong thing. I apologize. I had selected Lambert 2 instead of Lambert 1. So that is incorrect. Kind of, sort of. We actually need to bake it twice for Lambert 2 and Lambert 1. So making sure that our bake textures, let me actually fix this from our Lambert 2. Our ID needs to be on Lambert 2, material color, bake it down. Because remember, one section, Lambert 2 is the glass, the other one is the entire rest of the pillar. Okay, Lambert 1, big textures, again, those same parameters, but changing our thing to material color there, baking it down, and yes. That's because you have the texture set selected right now. Where's your texture set setting? No, where's your actual? Okay, so you need it in that viewable. Texture set list. That's this one. So view texture set list. If you are missing your texture set list, you need to make it viewable. And anything that you are missing, go to View, Views, and then you'll have all of your different windows. So mine are all displaying right now. So I have texture set list, layers, properties, viewer settings, display settings, yada, yada, yada. All of those should be visible. Once you're done, you can now start painting. You're what? It's supposed to be gray. No, it's not actually. Did I import the wrong file again? Well, at least it's easier in here. I can just swap out the... Hold on. Let's export it out again. Sure. Okay. Let's do this as an FBX file, actually. Sci-fi pillar. Multimat. High poly. All right. Okay, so this one is called Multimat High Poly. What you're going to want to do is under your Bake Texture options, just remove this one, and then add the new one. And try to bake again, and let's see if it works.
Which high definition mesh are we using?
Multimat High Poly.
I don't have that. I guess I gotta go get it.
Yeah. So, well, it's going to be in that, yeah. Okay, that's better. That is actually correct now. Crisis averted.
Multimat high poly. Is it the Aspen file or the normal one?
No, it's the FBX file that is
Okay.
game art, exercises, game environments, today's date.
Also, what is an Aspen file?
I have no idea.
Why are they called Aspen files?
Probably some data thing.
So, multimat highpoly.fbx. That's the one that you use for high definition mesh, and just rebake your textures, and now it should work properly. Yes, it should be. I'll copy it back over just to make sure. In every place that you guys have access to.
Oh, did I
All right, try that. Oh, no. Replace the file and destination. Okay, good. All right. Now your ID map should be correct. You have to rebake. Otherwise it will not actually.
So, just to recap, we're baking the multimat high poly in Lambert 1 on the multimat low poly.
Multimat high poly for both texture sets.
Okay, both texture sets at once.
Yeah, well, bake there, and then you have to go to the other one, then bake there. So it's doing two sets of maps. Again, two sets of maps for two different objects within those two different texture sets.
Are we using every map? Normal, world space, normal, ID, all of those?
Yeah, except for thickness.
Okay.
Yeah. Want everybody following along? Yes. They both need to be material color, yes. Alright. Yeah, just make sure that you do set your color ID map to material color instead of vertex color, and that should fix it if you had a baking error that popped up. All right.
Which one does that go in?
More specific, what's up?
Which one of those? Which one of the vertex, whatever? Which one of the maps is that?
That's the ID map.
Change that to material color.
Yes, change it to material, yes. Okay. Moving on. Whether you like it or not. So, the main difference being, compared to what we did last time, if I apply, I don't know, like an iron galvanized or something to this, to my Lambert 1. Notice that it has applied to our model except on the glass. Why is that?
These are two different texture map sets.
It's two different texture sets. So if I look to my Lambert 2, it does not have that same layer in there. So it's its own layer stack. It's its own layer list. So I can I can do this independently of the other thing. I can make my own custom flake if I wanted to, but I'm not going to use iron galvanized. That actually looks bad. There we go. What I'm going to probably use, I'm not worried about that so much right now. What I want to worry about is, I assume you guys will know generally the workflow of creating this metal and creating this rubber and other sections here, using the similar principles that you guys used before. It's creating like a rough steel. Generally on top of it, you can actually, if you wanted to, you don't even have to necessarily use one of these pre-made materials. You can create something from scratch, fill it in with a uniform color. It's say for the roughness, you could choose your own alpha roughness. You can choose your own procedural texture. So like black and white spots 2 here, I used for my roughness channel, and look at that. It actually adjusted my roughness for it. And it gives you random seeds. I can change my disorder, I can change my histogram contrast, all of this stuff in a loaded texture once I click on the word roughness on a normal fill layer. So I can really adjust this stuff from scratch and make stuff on my own without having to rely on something that's already pre-built. These just give you the extra options that come with extra parameters that come with these preset materials. But again, you can make this all from scratch if you want to, which in some cases might actually be better. So I'm actually going to do a paint layer over it. So create a new layer over it. Just fill it in. Let's say I want this kind of a medium bluish, medium dark blue pylon sci-fi thing. And again, I'm going to right click, add a black mask, right click, add a generator, and then maybe find my metal edges, metal edge wear. Right now it's doing the inverse of what I want, the opposite. It's a little too heavy, so I'm actually going to turn down that wear level and just make it a little bit less apparent. Actually, what I really want to do is on this layer change my roughness to that black and white spots here. There we go. And maybe turn down that and wait, what?
You wouldn't really need that original fill layer at this point, would you?
I would if I am going to see underneath it.
Yeah.
So that's what this is for. Yeah. In the parts that are metal underneath it. Now, to make it more apparent, that's what I'm actually doing. I'm going to probably turn up my wear level so that way you can actually see it. Maybe turn on triplanar for the option there. There we go. That looks a little bit better. And if I want to crunch it a bit more, I can add, right click and add another levels or paint adjustment and play around getting a better look overall to my edge wear damages until it looks more like something that would actually be accurate. Bless you. And I should say, You can also increase values such as height. So notice that this is a very kind of flat change in direction. Like, let's say if this were, bless you, had some varying amount of thickness for the paint compared to the metal, I'd actually go back to my layer itself. For my height, I'd actually increase the height very slightly and change that. Very, very slightly, but you can kind of see the difference of what it's actually changing. And it's actually going to change my normal and my bump information. I mean, if I go crazy, yeah, it's going to, you know, be a little way too much. Subtlety is the key, but if I just change it, it has some amount of thickness to it. Which is pretty cool.
You can variably change the value of the height.
The what?
You can variably change the height.
Yes, I can variably change the height if I wanted to. I can actually,
Instead of the slider, use a number.
well, yeah, if you want to use a number, what you do is on the right-hand side over here, they have that little pencil icon. You can actually punch in a value.
So if you want to do like 0.05.
Yeah, 0.05. There we go. That's too small, so I'm going to do 0.15. There you go. Actually, 0.1. I lied. There you go. That's a little bit closer to what I want. And these are a little too repetitious. Again, what I can do on this fill layer is that I can right-click, add a paint adjustment to this fill layer's mask, and actually block out some of these areas that are a little too much. And if I wanted to, I can also create an alpha brush or choose a different alpha for some dirt, maybe dirt 06. Just paint this in or out and kind of stencil it in if I really wanted to. And also change the overall grayscale of it if I want it to be semi cut into the model, but that looks kind of bad actually, so I might turn that off. There we go. There we go. And I'm just trying to clean up areas where it wouldn't necessarily make sense to have edge wear by using my paint and brushing back in values. And again, I'm gonna create a new folder, put all this stuff in there. I don't need that steel rough layer anymore, but I'm gonna put those two fill layers in that folder. Call this pylon base, and then right click, add a mask with a color selection, and just choose that green color. That way I'm only masking out that one area, that main base of the thingamabob. That's an official term. Yes. Oh.
If you wanted to add more, you just change the color to
For another layer?
like if you say you want to add more to that mask, you could actually do color picker and then do another mask for it.
For the color. Oh, to add more sections? Yeah. So if I wanted to add this leg here, with the same color, which I actually would want to do, I'm just going to select color picker. In this case, it's yellow, and there we go.
So you set these you set these color groups up beforehand, right?
Yes. Normally, you would do this yourself. And one thing I didn't show you guys is you can actually change the overall tolerance of the selection of color. Right now, it's set to like 0.1. I can increase it or decrease it. It's actually not going to change on this, weirdly enough. So we'll just put that back to 0.1. Anyway, if you have colors that are like really close to each other, you can change the tolerance to kind of eat away into it, the selection. But we're not going to worry about that. Okay. Everybody's kind of wrapping up that step. Just creating the general base color. Yeah? Okay. Let's kind of move on. And I want to show you guys a couple more things, and then I'll let you work on the rest of it and working on your own projects for the rest of the day. So I want to add opacity. I would need to actually make glass, right? So that's going to be in my Lambert 2. So if I just create a new fill layer, here's a problem. I can't actually see through it, and I have no way of controlling that attribute. So what I need to do is I actually need to tell Substance Painter, hey, I want to use an opacity channel and actually be able to paint that information in. So the way that I do that is I actually create a new, in our texture set settings, if you notice where the word channels is, you have your base color, height, roughness, metallic, and normal. We're just going to go ahead and add the little plus sign here. We can add other channels in here. So we can add stuff like ambient occlusion. We can paint in emissive or opacity itself. So 2 additional channels that I want to add are emissive and opacity, because this is going to be a sci-fi pillar, so obviously you got to have like a power core in the middle, right? It's got to look cool. So we're going to add emissive and opacity channels to this channel list, our texture set settings. So click on emissive. Notice that it adds emissive here. Click on opacity. It adds it here as well. So notice that they are now added in your material options. So you have emiss and up for opacity. Up over here. So once your texture set's going to be over here, but same idea, plus sign, you'll be able to choose emissive and opacity and add that to your channels. So a couple more things we need to do. For opacity to work right, we have to do a couple of things to prep it. What you want to do first is just have a fill layer beneath everything set to pure black. I believe that's, unless they've changed something significantly, this is the only way I was able to export stuff. Or actually with the opacity, I believe set to, no, it's the color. We'll deal with it whenever we get there. That may not be the case. But one of the main things, if I try to create a new layer to help control opacity, notice it does not change anything. Opacity is not changing on my model. Well, that's because I'm not using the correct shader on this model in my viewport. It doesn't have alpha enabled. So under your viewer settings, yep. So under what's called your viewer settings, in my case it's on my bottom left, yours may be on your bottom right, viewer settings, you're going to scroll down until you see the word shader. And right now it's set to PBR metal rough. But we actually need to change that to something with an actual alpha. If you click on it, you come up with this menu here, which gives you stuff like clay, Dota 2, because I guess they have some sponsorship, non-PBR spec, gloss, car paint, PBR coated, all these other options. The only one I really care about is PBR. You can do with alpha blending. That should be fine. It's a little bit more intensive of a shader. You could also do PBR metal rough with alpha test, but the blending might give you the best option or the best viewport settings for it. So if you click on that, now I'm actually able to look through my model here. There we go. Okay, good. That did change it. So again, just to recap, black fill layer on the very bottom of your layers in here. You're going to create another fill layer to help control the alpha and color of this glass. But in order to actually enable the opacity to be viewable, it's going to be under your shader, under your viewer settings, shader, PBR with alpha blending. You enable your opacity here in your material options, and then you can drag it back and forth to adjust your opacity. In this case, I'm also going to change the color slightly. Again, very light green or blue. Because why not? Actually, maybe like a purple or pink. There we go. Yes.
I tried to do something with my the color, and it didn't work the way that I wanted it to, and I want to see why that was.
It did not work with the color.
Basically what I did was I threw a steel rough on it, and then I threw a paint on top of it, and I wanted to use a generator to make the rust, or make the steel show through paint, like something straight.
Oh, okay. You don't have a chili with generator or anything yet.
I deleted it. It broke everything.
I'll come back to that. I want to get through this stuff with glass first.
Okay.
So, just remind me after the lecture is done, and we'll look at it. Okay?
Okay.
Sure. I actually noticed this model is actually wrong too. The actual center. I'm not gonna have you guys change it and upload it again and start from scratch. Don't worry. But the center pillar here is actually inverted. The normals are inverted the wrong way. So, okay, that's fine. But now that I have glass in here, what piece of glass that you ever looked at is completely 100% smooth that you can fully see through it? Pretty much none, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are the commercials where the bird flies into the glass and, you know, poor bird, right? But in real life, windows and glass has some amount of fingerprints, smudges, and scratches on it. What channel would I adjust to make those changes? Somebody said roughness? Roughness. Now, this is a metallic surface, technically. If you want to be, you know, if you want to go that route, it is quote-unquote a metallic surface. If you want to bump up the metallic, that way you get a lot more reflection. And then in our roughness, you can actually change the amount of roughness, but there's a couple different ways to do this. I could use sort of a procedural texture to create general roughness over my glass like this. Or if I wanted to do this all from scratch, I did not show you guys this yet, but in our layers, notice that we have something of above base color, or it's called base color. Notice that if you click on it, your different channels are appearing here. So right now it's in base color. You can paint all of your channels on all at once. If I wanted to paint on only my roughness, I can go to my roughness channel here and actually, oh, actually I lied. What you would need to do is create a new paint layer. Excuse me. You can do a paint layer, or we can do. Let's do this. Let's right-click over this fill layer here. We'll add a white mask this time, right? Because I want it to be like all 100% there. And then with my brush, I can first right-click, add a paint modifier to that mask. Correct? So I've create a mask, create a modifier for that mask to paint on it, and now what I can do is actually paint on roughness. And this is where your tablet might come into play, where I can actually paint directly on here, only in roughness. Now you may want to change your overall grayscale value. And I'm just using a dirt brush just to kind of create my smudges. May not be 100% what I want. I actually prefer, I think, if I used a procedural texture overall. Oh, they do. There we go. So we'll just use that. Is it called fingerprint?
Yeah, it's called fingerprint.
Fingerprint. Perfect. You can drag it onto your alpha. Use a giant fingerprint, or you can actually scale it down and kind of put it all throughout. There we go. So it actually painted on. Now it's not going to get that much resolution on it because the size of the UVs. It is actually dependent on it. So the bigger it is, the more detailed resolution you can get. But I actually don't like that, so I'm going to remove my, clear my mask, or remove my mask, and then apply a procedural thing to that, and then lower my histogram for it. So, okay, so one more thing I want to show is how we create something with an emissive channel to make something glow. So going back to Lambert 1, Lambert 1 will be the texture set that we actually have the center core on. So I'm going to create a new fill layer. This time I'm going to make it a bright, I don't know, red this time. And I'm just going to fill it in a group by itself. Add a mask with color selection for, whoops, Control Z. It's going to be, I believe, this red color here. So there we go. It's this area right here in your UV map. So we can turn on emissive if we have it, but we don't have it in this set list. So I'm going to have to add that channel in here. So I need my emissive in here. I can actually remove my emissive from my other one. So in my Lambert 1, I definitely need emissive to be exported out. I can turn it on and change my emissive color. I'm going to sample maybe this red color here. And remember, the closer to white that an emissive color is, the brighter it will be. But again, the problem is being that we're not actually seeing it properly represented here in our viewport. So again, we have to change, in this case, it's called display settings. So if you want to pay attention, under display settings, should be near your viewport settings. If you click on that tab, we can activate what's called post effects. So this is kind of how we see the representation of it in here. If we turn our post effects, it kind of does some additional processes over our image. So we can turn on, you know, stuff like anti-aliasing, we turn on color correction, we turn on all this other stuff. But what I'm really concerned with is glare. So if I turn on glare and then change over the luminance value, why is this not changing? That is, oh, there we go. Turn your threshold a little bit further down. Turn your emissive color way up. There we go. So you have to have a pretty bright emissive color. And we get lens flare for days. So it's under your display settings, glare options. Turn down your threshold a bit and turn up your luminance value, so you can see the proper effect of your emissive channel. Again, just to recap, if you fell behind, I'm going to create a new fill layer. I'm going to turn off this so you can see. Making sure that in my texture set list, first emissive is added. So if you need to, the little plus icon in your texture set list will allow you to add additional channels. So emissive is the one that we need for Lambert 1. Create a new fill layer. I only really concerned with the color and the emissive. I could play around with other stuff, but I'm only going to change the color to maybe a red, or in this case, maybe a bright green. Just to change it up a little bit. My emissive color is currently set to black, which means it is not emissive. I need to turn it to another color. I can use my color picker to click and drag over whatever color I have on my screen. This also includes if you have 2 monitors, you can actually click off of Substance Painter, I believe, and it'll select something off screen. Don't hold me to that, because I don't have 2 monitors. Click on that, and I can brighten this up a bit closer to white. It's not being visible right now because, whoops. It's not visible right now because I don't have my post effects turned on. So under my display settings, scroll down to my activate post effects, turn that on, and then turn on my glare. If you turn down your threshold here, it'll make it crazy bright. But you find a good balance between lowering your threshold and upping your luminance values to get an effect that you want.
It does go over to the other monitors.
Oh, cool. So, neat. So once you do that, now you're pretty much set, and I will let you guys continue to work. And I'm going to save what I have. Okay. And I'll be walking around helping people.